communities working together to combat gun violence and protect those who live in their communities. Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Laurel Hess and this is Comcast Newsmakers. Joining me now is the Oakland County Commissioner, Bill Dwyer. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure being here.
And we should mention that you are an Oakland County Commissioner now, but to have an extensive background in law enforcement.
49 years in law enforcement, 23 with the Detroit Police Department, 23 as the police chief in Farmington Hills, and 3 years as the police commissioner in Warren. So 49 years. So I've seen the gun violence, and I can tell you right now there's no simple solution to gun violence in this country. But we've taken a very proactive approach and a bipartisan effort to look at gun violence and how we can decrease gun violence. Over a period of several months now, we've had 5 public hearings up at the county, and we've had 4 school superintendents coming in talking about their concerns, and of course Sandy Hook. Just recently, it was a year when that tragedy took place, when 20 first graders were murdered and 6 others, and then the shooter himself committed suicide. So we know the concerns that the schools have now as far as security. We also talked to the federal authorities, Deputy Director of the FBI, Barbara McQuaid, the U.S. Attorney, the Michigan State Police, talking about their concerns as far as the databases and the clearance checks as far as on weapons and how weapons get into the hands of people that perhaps are mentally ill. So we had experts in on mentally ill programs and what we should do. And I can tell you there's a stigma attached to the mentally ill. Only 4% of those that have a mental illness commit violent crimes. So what we need is actually, listening to the experts, more funding for mental health, additional funding for our school safety programs.
You had these task force and you were able to actually produce a curbing gun violence report, a fairly extensive report.
That's correct.
What were the main recommendations? What did you find and what can you now put into place to help curb gun violence?
Sure. Well, first of all, we looked at the violent video games, and I want to just mention that for a second. Both in Newtown, Connecticut, Sandy Hook, and Albuquerque, New Mexico, that massacre, both of those young men for hours spent hours of time in the basement of their homes looking at these violent video games. We believe that plants a seed. So just very soon we're going to have a public service announcement. Diana Lewis, who was with Channel 7, who's retired now, has volunteered her services. So we're going to get the message out that there's a rating system attached to these video games that parents should be aware of. Secondly, in many of these shootings we've seen, we had a shooting of a 3-year-old that picked up a gun off a bed at their home. These guns have to be secured in the home. So we're going to do a public service announcement, Diana Lewis, on gun safety, getting your gun locks, gun vaults, because even in Newtown, Connecticut, Sandy Hook, those guns were in the home. If they perhaps would have been in a vault or locked, maybe that massacre would not have occurred. The same thing in many of these cases. In all of these massacres that we've experienced over the past 8 to 10 years, it wasn't the illegal weapons. It was weapons that were illegally obtained, but the clearance checks weren't, there was loopholes in the clearance checks. So that's a concern, and we're looking at that. And then secondly, we just have to take a real hard look as far as some of the other programs that we're dealing with, as far as making sure that the databases that the federal people have, the state people and the locals, that they can check out people thoroughly. Right now you have no way to check on mentally ill people, domestic violence people, and violent drug offenders.
So it sounds like there's a whole lot of things that need to happen between locking up your guns, checking out the ratings of the violent video games, paying attention to mental health, everybody collaborating together. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Today's Comcast Newsmaker was Oakland County Commissioner Bill Dwyer.